Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Vayechi, and Yaakov lived, is actually the name of the Torah portion where Yaakov dies. And not only does Yaakov die in this week's Torah portion, but we actually learn all of the laws of Shiva and Shloshim and burial from Jacob, from Yaakov, and the concept of giving speeches at a funeral, Hespedim. So how could it be that Yaakov, it says that this is the parsha of Vayechi Yaakov, and so there's a very interesting Talmud that says, Yaakov Avinu lo met. Jacob, our forefather, never died. What does it mean, Jacob, our forefather, never died? It says, we learn about everything in this week's Torah portion about his death. We even learn many laws about Jacob's death. And the answer is, it says in the Talmud, Mazar b'chaim afhu b'chaim. Just as his children are alive, so too he is alive. Meaning, just as his children continue in the path of Yaakov, so too does the life of Yaakov, the eternal life. Because as a human being, while sometimes a person passes away physically, spiritually, his life is continued by his children. And we see that specifically in this Torah portion alone. In this Torah portion, Jacob makes an oath to his sons. Do not bury me in the land of Egypt, but make sure I go back to the cave of Machpelah that I purchased over there. Sarah is buried, and Rebekah and Yitzchak and Rivka are buried, and Abraham and Sarah are buried, and my wife Leah is buried there as well. Make sure to not bury me in the land of Egypt. Even though in Egypt he would have got a grand burial on a beautiful site as being the viceroy's father. And nevertheless, Joseph asks Paro permission to go and bury his father. And Paro says, please, of course, give your father the honor that he deserves and the honor that he requested. And so Joseph goes, and together with all the brothers, and they bury Yaakov in the land of Israel, in Hebron, the cave of Machpelah, where he's buried till today. What happens is, right after that, Joseph as well makes the exact same oath to his children and to his followers. And that is, now Joseph is dying at the end of this week's Torah portion. And he says, do not bury me in the land of Egypt. Now for Jacob, for Yaakov, the cave of Machpelah was very significant. His father was buried there. His grandfather was buried there. His wife was buried there before he went down to the land of Egypt in order to be there temporarily with his son. But for Joseph, Egypt was his entire identity. Egypt was where he was the viceroy, he was the king, he was royalty. He could have been King Tut, he could have had pyramids for himself and be embalmed like in the Egyptian museum as one of the greatest saviors of the land of Egypt. Instead, he asked to be buried, and he gets buried in a place in the land of Shechem, in the area of Shechem, which today is a very challenging area, a place in which is very difficult even to go visit him there, because it's in the center of a city that is occupied by Palestinians. And so to get to Joseph's tomb, I was there once when I was in yeshiva. You had to have a special military convoy that would go from the top of the hill, and the door would open. Even the soldiers were afraid. They opened up the doors. You would all run in and went to Joseph's tomb. And today, even that system of visiting Joseph's tomb is very, very limited. It only happens a couple of times a year. Nevertheless, Joseph chose this over being embalmed like the king of Egypt, and with the greatest respect that he could have had, because he wanted to follow in his father's ways. And he knew that at the end of the day, he was Yosef HaTzadik. He was a righteous Jew. His place wasn't in Egypt. Even though he became the viceroy, even though his brothers, he barely lived in the land of Israel. His brothers sent him into a slavery, as a gypsy. But Egypt was his life. Egypt is where he became. It is where he became who Joseph really was. And instead of being buried in the land of Egypt, he chooses to be in the land of Israel, to follow in his father's footsteps. And that's what it means, Mazar b'chaim afu b'chaim. Just as his children are alive, so too he is alive. Jacob realized even the time that he embedded with Joseph, the impact that he made was made forever. And so too, when we see our children, we have to make that tremendous impact. Even if we only have our short time with them, that they should be able to continue on the legacy in which we leave. That they should be continuing in the legacy that our fathers and grandparents left us. The Torah treasure. It says, Torah tziva lanu marasha kilas Yaakov. The Torah is an inheritance for us. And we have to make sure that we are there to inherit and to give over to our children so they can continue in our ways and they can continue the legacy of the Jewish people. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll see you tonight at 6 p.m., tomorrow morning, 10:15.